some people are really slick at being almost right, and you just wait. You know, I was just talking yesterday with somebody about, you know, where you are, you're having a conversation, the person seems to be absolutely on it, and then they turn around and they absolutely let rip at a member of staff and shred them in front of it. And you're thinking, okay, so you're very glossy on the front, not so good behind. And then that underlies, actually, well, yeah, maybe I'm not going to be doing as much business because I want that to be right through the board. I think also, historically, with the way businesses have grown, you know, again, we were talking about this earlier, that churn that companies have now, you might have 5 or 7 different careers in today's world, whereas, you know, when I started out, you probably had 1. And a lot of that knowledge is walking out the door on a daily basis, and there is no real way of capturing it.
Hello and welcome to the Business Growth Show.
I'm John from Octopus Computers.
And I'm Adam from Active Internet Marketing.
This is the show where we sit down with business owners, founders and entrepreneurs from Stamford and the Greater Rutland area.
We discuss their journey, look at their wins and their challenges, and get practical advice that you can apply.
New episodes come out fortnightly, so if you want to stay up to date, drop us a follow or subscribe wherever you're listening.
Welcome to the Business Growth Show, Oliver. If you'd like to just introduce yourself and tell us who you are and a bit about your business.
I'm Oliver Hemsley. I have lived in Rutland pretty much all my life. I have exited the county occasionally. They've let me out. I do have a passport. And I have several businesses I'm connected with, and I'm also a county councillor. Anything about Rutland, I probably know some of the answers.
I think let's start with Rutland then.
Yeah.
Because not everyone might be aware of the place. I'm a resident and love it. So what do you love about Rutland? How has it been for you over the years you've lived there?
It's been really good to me. I've run businesses here for nearly 45 years. And if you are fair and honest, your clients pretty much are fair and honest in return. So I've built a successful gardening business, which I ran for 35 years. And we never had any contracts or anything. We just turned up, did the work. You know, I had keys to the houses. It was a safe space. And the people are nice. The atmosphere is great. And I think it's only when you exit or you hear from people who've come to visit, you know, join us like you have, Adam, that you actually have something quite special.
Definitely.
So it's got a nice pace of life. It's easy to get to London. It's quite quiet for the younger ones, but I was a younger one here, and I managed to find enough entertainment. Maybe my parents wouldn't think quite appropriate, but hey.
And is that love of the county why you got involved in the councillor side of things, or unrelated?
Yes, it is that. I was actually talking to a friend who said, stop moaning about stuff, get involved. So I got involved. And I really appreciate that. I've done lots of stuff for Rutland. You know, I put a kids' dome in at Langham, which was a preschool, and things like that. And my parents were always very much sort of Rutland-faced. You know, my dad was a magistrate, and you know, all sorts of things like that. My mum ran the Red Cross, so I suppose that sort of ethos was in the background of my life. And then suddenly I thought, actually, I do need to give something back, because for, you know, the 35 years I'd had sort of fairly good time in Rutland. And I now, you know, you'll know I've portrayed it as the beating heart of the UK. I started with just the East Midlands, but I think, hey, you know, actually you look at it, it is the beating heart of the UK. And you've got such an amazing group of people living in Rutland. Some of them don't work here, you know, they sort of commute out, but, you know, there's a really good mix, a real strength in the county. And I think especially as the way we're heading now with Devolution and local government reorganisation, and let's not go political on it, it's just that Rutland and any community of a size needs to really sort of, you know, get hold of the people around them and make a stronger group, because together we are much more formidable and we can achieve a lot.
Can I just ask on that? Because I think there is a lot of confusion around the area as to what's actually happening. Everything from we're no longer going to be Rutland, we're losing the name, it's all going to disappear, to I'm sure it'll be fine in the end, head in the sand, ignore it. What is the plan over the next 3 to 5 years?
There's a mixture of all those things, probably, John, but in later this summer, we will get a sort of definitive guide from the government on what it's going to look like. So whether that's, it'll be a Leicester version of some sort, I'm pretty certain, because that's the only ones that are on the table. And for lots of reasons, you know, our health, our fire, our police all come from Leicestershire, so it would be quite complex to try and build something different. It doesn't stop us from being able to use, you know, Lincolnshire hospitals or Northamptonshire hospitals or whatever. So it's not going to exclude that. But I think we will retain the identity, whether it's at the level that people want it. But Rutland is never going to disappear. We're not going to suddenly end up with East Leicestershire Water or anything. It'll always be Rutland Water. And I think that people have got scared a little bit. There's some noise about it. I even wrote to the King, actually, and had a polite letter saying he couldn't get involved, but he was pleased that people were caring about things. So.
That's interesting. You see, you actually got a reply from him.
I suspect it probably wasn't handwritten by Charles, but
just a text
from his office.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I was really pleased because I think I didn't write because I wanted a reply, but actually there is a huge amount, and if you apply for a job, neither of you will have had to have done that for a long time. But when I stopped being a leader of the council, I ended up applying for NED roles, and I think I got one reply out of 120 applications. Right. So there is a tendency to people go, I can't be bothered. So it was nice that he bothered to reply.
Yeah,
that's really
excellent. Yeah. And obviously you've had a variety of businesses you've been involved in Rutland over those years. Do you think being involved with the council on that side of your life has been a positive on that side, or has it made things harder? What's the reality of that been?
There's some expectations if you have a business and you're involved with the council. You have to be sort of, clear and clean. Obviously, some people don't see that. But I think it's frustrating when you become a county councillor because you suddenly realise that, we're nimble. Small businesses can make a decision. It happens tomorrow or even maybe later in that day. Rutland County Council, like all councils, it's like a super tanker. So you make a decision and you think, I'm sure we decided that a while ago, and it still hasn't taken place, but it has to go through all the necessary channels. So it can be quite frustrating on that angle.
Quite an opposite end of the scale then. Yeah.
And they're very aware about health and safety and all those things. There was a leak on a roof, and my experience is being a builder of, and sort of interested in property for many years. I said, well, I'll go up and have a look. Oh, you can't. Why not? Oh, well, because you're not trained. I said, I've probably been on more roofs than you have.
Yeah.
So is that bureaucracy for the sake of it? Is it just inherent in public sector, or is there a way to make them more agile?
I think it's an absolute fear of somebody suing them. So it's an aversion to any risk. And they do absolutely want to make sure everything is done by the book. Because I think also today's world, especially social media, you make a mistake, it's all over the social media and it can blow up so fast. So I think that has probably exacerbated it. But my son's just doing a building project, so he's a principal contractor. And I can't even visit the site because I don't have a green ticket.
Right.
And I went, you're serious? He said, yeah, I cannot allow you on site. And he's having to work out which hard hat colour you should wear. There isn't actually a protocol, but he was going, should they be blue or red? I said, I really don't know. You should probably go and research that.
Moreover, who cares?
Well, a hard hat's probably the best thing. Doesn't matter about the colour. It's not going to do, that's a red hat. I better not hit that one.
Exactly. For the extra warnings. So tell us then about Stone Soup, because it's where I think your focus is at the moment.
Yeah, Stone Soup Solutions comes from all the things I've done. So I've, run businesses. So I was in landscape gardening, painting, decorating, and we did that all over the country. Then obviously I had the sort of property management company, which was doing maintenance. I built eco houses, I did conversions and all those sorts of things. And I learned a lot from doing those of how to put businesses together. I even set up a franchise in my gardening business. It didn't particularly take off, but I learned a lot from those things. And I look at today's world and I think that there's huge amounts of information out there. Either you can get it from professionals, consultants, in inverted commas. And I just say that because there are a lot of people who haven't actually done, if that makes sense. And I respect those that have done because you then get that real depth of support and honesty. So I felt there was a space for me. I was doing a little bit of work with a company explaining how to interact with local government because it's not the same as interacting with an ordinary business. Quite often you just go and talk to the CEO in an ordinary business and you percolate down, whereas you probably come into the middle in a government organisation and work your way up to the head person because they're too busy to even consider looking at you. So I thought, yeah, here's an opportunity. And it took a while to sort of form in my head. So I started off just as a consultant. And I don't particularly like the word because of the connotations that is just wrapped around it. So I thought, I was with my brother-in-law probably 10 years ago, sitting in the North Sea waiting for the wind to blow. We were out
Presumably
sailing
on a boat.
We were on a boat, yeah. We were waiting for the wind to blow to get us sort of further round. And he told me the stone soup story. And I thought, do you know what? That's interesting. Didn't really think about it. And then I was thinking about, what am I going to call my business? And when I started my gardening business, we called Paint It or Plant It, I must have written, 12 sides of A4 with possible names, and then ran them past my sort of trusted advisors, one of which was my brother. And I can't tell you what he said when I came up with a name because it's unrepeatable. But it was like, that's a stupid name, or you can't call it that. Oh, have you thought of this? And then, of course, you think about what do the initials stand for, and all that, and it gets really quite complex. Yeah. So I thought, right, I need to think about something. So I started off with, having come from that. So I then just set to and came up with the name Stone Soup Solutions. What's the Stone Soup story? Well,
because I don't know that.
I am aware of it.
So it's basically the original story is written about the 1800s somewhere, Middle Europe, and there's a man who's got the world on his back. He's been a pretty hard time, and he's travelling from village to village, just trying to find a living and something to do. And he arrives at this particular village, which had a really hard time. They, famine and just generally, and they're quite insular. They don't really want people. So he knocks on the doors, and they basically say to get on. No, not interested. But at the end of the village, there's a beautiful clearing, and there's sort of, there's a little brook running down the side of it. And he thinks, it's a perfect place for me to put up my tent for the night because it's getting on a bit. So he sets his tent up, gets his stove, gets a fire going, and he hangs the pot on. I think having put some water in it. And then he gets into his bag and gets out a stone and pops it in there and sort of, and somebody says, what are you doing? So I'm making some stone soup. And they didn't really take much more notice of him. And then as it began to boil, he went to sample it. And they could do with something, I don't know. And one of the people said, what about some salt? Oh, that would be great. And gradually the villagers sort of succumb, and they bring him a carrot and a parsnip and potato and then a bit of mutton and all those things. So he ends up with a lovely rich soup at the end of it all. So he takes a stone out, carefully puts that back in his bag, and they all enjoy the soup. So relatively, for me, the sort of analogy for me would be that I bring the ingredients that may be missing already in your business, but I'll put them in the right order to make your business successful and make sure that you end up with something that's worth having.
I think the name makes a lot more sense.
I like that
now.
Yeah. That's really good.
It's funny, I actually only heard that story on Friday last week.
Did you?
So I wasn't aware until very recently, but someone else told it to me. So
yeah, and I think stories seem to be part of today's world. If you've people relate with people, you can have all the systems in the world, you can be all automated, but actually people do business with people, and you have to trust them, and you have to be able to look them in the eye and go, I can do that.
Yeah.
Is there a particular industry or type or size of business that you're looking to support more than others? Or
I think it's ideally I had something in mind, but it seems to be I'm ending up with quite a lot of startups at the moment.
Right.
So taking them from that nervousness when they're beginning, they're even getting a name on the board. Some of them, or they're wanting to scale up. There's one lady who's got a business that she's anticipating to end up in the big shops. And she's just a cottage industry at the moment, doing an amazing job. But, how do you think about when you're actually making a product yourself and you do 4 a day and then you're wanting to provide? So it's actually how do you expect,
orders,
and how do you manage all that, but keep the quality and everything else that you want? So it's helping her on those journeys. And then, who can you leverage in? So, she's going to an event and there's an opportunity to leverage in a fairly serious person, and so why not try it? You've got nothing to lose. So getting those doors open, introductions, and using my network, and people like yourselves, who I've worked with, and I point people in your directions. And I will continue to do that because it's that trust that I've built up over the number of years, and especially more so since 2019-20, when I sort of really got involved much more visibly, that you build that network, and it's just invaluable.
Like say, relationships are so important part of business, definitely, and trust you mentioned as well, and being having the right reputation and people being aware of your principles and ethics, etc., is really, really important.
Yeah, because you can write everything you like, but until somebody meets you and shakes your hand and looks at you, and go, okay, fine, yeah, you are what you say. And there are some people who are really slick at being almost right, and you just wait. You know, I was just talking yesterday with somebody about, you know, where you are, you're having a conversation, the person seems to be absolutely on it, and then they turn around and they absolutely let rip at a member of staff and shred them in front of it. And you're thinking, okay, so you're very glossy on the front, not so good behind.
Yeah.
And then that underlies actually, well, yeah, maybe I'm not going to be doing as much business because I want that to be right through the board. We all have bad days. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, you can have those, but it's how you do it and where you do it.
Definitely.
And you don't need to swear relatively, unless you're really angry.
I hope you're enjoying today's episode. Please remember to like, give us a rating, give us a follow and subscribe wherever you're listening if you're enjoying the show.
And thinking back across your career and how you're setting yourself out to help people from your experience at the moment, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced perhaps earlier in the business or over the years with business?
I had sort of cottage industry when I was at school. Actually, I ran a printing club and used to charge for my printing services because I was quite good at it. And that's where it led to me going off to do an HND in business management and printing. And I thought I knew quite a lot. And I then went off to Australia because I had a little blot on my copybook and had a year there. And I worked for lots of people. I came home and I thought, I can do that. I'm better than most of these people. Not in an arrogant way, but, you know, I could...
Quality side.
Yeah, I could see holistically what needed to be done. And I then started doing it myself and probably cost me a lot of thousands of pounds. So the biggest single error was being arrogant and not really learning the depth that you need to have. You know, it's great to be able to, you know, put two pieces of wood together and go, I'm a carpenter. But then you start working on that and you start tuning it and you then end up and find actually that you're a cabinet maker. But, you know, you are really just a make you learn for a long time. So I learned a lot. I had my father who was a businessman and probably only about 5 years into business, he said, I can't support you anymore. I can't enable you to go to the next level because I don't know how you can go there because it's beyond me. And then I didn't really think about looking for anybody to help me. And, you know, I don't need a coach. I don't need a mentor, all those things. And they weren't really around, to be honest, in those days. There were few and far between. I had some support from one of the government bodies that were doing stuff, and I can't remember which, a whole lot of initialisms, aren't there? And the guy sat there and he'd been an MD of a company and he basically went through his life story. And I thought, I don't think I'm any wiser than
that doesn't apply to me at all. Yeah.
And we looked at, you know, ISO 9001 or where it was and all those things. And, you must have these things. And well, not really. I don't see what that's going to benefit my clients, you know. So I think those things you believe you have to have. And then that led me to inquiring and really wanting to get under the skin of stuff. So if somebody says to me, you need to have this, I'll go, okay, why? And I won't necessarily say that to the person. I'll go off and then I'll come back and I'll give them my reasons why I think they're incorrect in a polite way and say, I'm going to decline your offer of signing up for X, Y, or Z. You know, people said I need to go and get ILM 7, you know, from my experiences. And I go, why? Well, because it tells people what you can do. I said, well, once they've met me, they'll know I can do it. So they don't need a bit of paper that tells me because it's a bit of paper.
No, I agree. It's true of a lot of regulations, especially ISO as well, I think.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of that. You've got to have it to operate in this sector. Not unless my clients demand it, to be honest. Until that's a regulatory obstacle I've got to overcome. It's needless cost for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, 9001's great for lean manufacturing and those pieces, but I wouldn't go deep into, unless you're running at that scale, focus on sales.
Yeah, and it is actually remembering why did you start the business? You know, do you want to be completely compliant and broke, or do you want to actually be running a business that you know is compliant but not necessarily with a certificate to prove it? You know.
So, what skills do you think make a good entrepreneur, a good business owner? What skills can people learn to improve?
To listen, I think that's a very big one, and it's not listening to your friends. You know, if you tell your friends you're going to start a business, they're going to want to support you. They're not going to tell you that's a stupid idea. There was a guy came to me wanting to start a coffee shop. And I said, you just need to consider how many there are. And it's exploring. Another one came with a window cleaning business, and he was going to stand the water tank up behind the cab in his van. And I went to him, have you thought about this? And he went, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you stop your van in a hurry, that water is going to continue and it's going to come straight through the cab. I'm not sure you'll survive that. Oh, well, what do I need to do? So I said, well, you put it down on the floor, you have it made low and you have it baffled. Well, why do I need all that? How did I know that? Well, from experiences and things. So you need to listen. You need to ask the experts. Trouble is finding the experts, because there's plenty out there who will tell you, all sorts of stuff. But I think, and persevere. I mean, a lot of people give up when it starts getting tough, and they don't realise. And understanding that you probably need to have a little bit of money put on one side that you can dip into. Don't
the
cruise.
war chest, as I call it.
Yeah.
No, it's quite hard to discern, I think, if someone is an expert or if they're full of hot air. I think it's the polite way of saying it. Any tips for someone who wants to know if the person I'm speaking to knows their stuff? How do you find out?
I will have an early conversation with them. So I get a background. I'll ask them a couple of questions. And they may not be particularly relevant, but I just want to see how they answer them. And then I will go off and I will find information about the topic I want to talk to them about, in more depth.
Yeah.
So I've got a background, I understand where they're going, and then I'll ask them a couple of questions and see where the answers go. And if they begin to marry up, okay, fine. Maybe interpretation. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about it's somebody's perception of stuff. So I give them a bit of latitude, and then you probably hit them with a couple of questions, which if they're not going to get right, you're not doing business with them. And don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to say I'm not interested in working with you.
I think you need to fit, from what you just described, you need to fit somebody with a similar personality and similar traits, I think, to work together and gel with them in the right way. And that could help you do that, couldn't it, through that kind of assessment, I guess.
I think, I don't necessarily think you need to be of a similar personality, because I think, opposites can attract, as they say, but it's just making sure you can work with a person, because especially if you're going to, be working closely and you're going to be sharing what some people class as secrets, and you maybe even have NDAs or non-disclosure agreements in place. But it's actually, you're letting them into your personal space. If you're really going to be honest about your business, and I have met one or two people who clearly aren't going to share the information, and you go, well, I really can't help you if you're not going to be honest with me about, where you're going or what you want to achieve. The other thing, we're talking about sort of what would you recommend, is think about your long-term exit strategy. And I think to me, that seemed illogical, and more so from talking to people like Emily Potts. You go, actually, that exit is really important, because if you build a business on the understanding that at some point you'll want to leave it or relinquish command, then you need to put the team in the right order. And while you're the team, that's fine. But when you bring 2 or 3 others in, you then want to make sure that they've got the principles, the ethos, how your business is run, what is important to you, where are your red lines, and also a process, so that process continues. So they don't know that you've stopped doing it. It's now, somebody else has taken on that responsibility.
No, I agree. The build to sell mentality just means that the business must run without you.
Yeah.
Whereas if that isn't there from the start or even halfway through, and suddenly you're looking to have an easier life, or you've worked for 10 years and you want to relax a bit, you can't, because if you step away, the business falls down very quickly. Yeah,
and I think a lot of business owners are very tight about control. They believe they have to be there. And my son's really keen. Well, he's now a managing director, because he's always wanted to be a director. And I went to him, why do you want to be that? And I was actually thinking this morning, as I was sort of prepping to come here, that I was a sole trader, and then I had partnership, and then limited companies. You're still the bottle washer. You're still the all things. You just have a different title. It doesn't mean you're anything different. So, and I think when you start thinking like a managing director or a senior director in a company, that's when you really begin to see the reasons for having, backed off and allowing people to explore. And if people do things differently, but the outcome is still what you asked for, I'm sure my sister will not forgive me, but years ago we went to Norfolk, family get-together, loads of the family there. And my sister asked my wife to cut up some tomatoes. And now, there's several ways you can slice them. You can, make them into little triangles or whatever. And my wife chose one way, and my sister goes, oh, no, you can't do it like that. At the end of the day, it's a tomato that's going in a salad that's going to be eaten. It is the outcome. It was delivering an answer. And I think sometimes we get too stressed in, actually the process, not the outcome.
So that perfect is the enemy of great. Sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Not my quote, I should say.
No, I'm sure there's lots of quotes.
Is there anything new with technology, and that's obviously the world's changing a lot. Is there something you're advising people on and involving in your sort of offering?
I am not an expert in a lot of these things. So obviously the one that comes to mind immediately when you say that is AI.
Yeah.
And I think my advice to anyone is, I'll introduce you to people who can certainly help. And I think that's where I am. I'm an introducer and a connector. But also, don't believe it's all the answers. And it doesn't matter what technology is out there. I remember, doing longhand bookkeeping, double entry, because the computer was going to take so long to do it. And I mean, the one we had at school, I could beat it with a slide rule, I don't mean physically, but, you give it a calculation and it would just take so long, and a grain of sand and it would crash. So I think it's just embrace those technologies, but don't think that they're the answer to absolutely everything. But I mean, Wikipedia and all those things, it's somebody's view.
Yeah.
But people go, it says so on Wikipedia. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing that, we've got that total belief. And you show a child or a young adult a dictionary or a thesaurus and they go, what's that?
I do think we're losing the ability to parse truth to a degree.
Yeah.
There's so much misinformation that when it comes to things like sales or purchasing, it's really hard now because we're so used to going, actually, there's a different viewpoint that agrees with everything. How do you search it online? How do you find the right help?
I think also, historically, with the way businesses have grown, and again, we were talking about this earlier, that churn that companies have now, you might have 5 or 7 different careers in today's world, whereas when I started out, you probably had one. And a lot of that knowledge is walking out the door on a daily basis, and there is no real way of capturing it. There's a story about the guy who was making a very specific concrete product. And it had to be, this guy was coming to retirement, and the company realised they needed to get the product passed on to somebody. So they went through all the processes, and it was quite simple. It was 5 shovels of this, 3 shovels of that, this amount of water and things. And sometimes the product came out right, and sometimes it didn't when this guy was trying to make it. So they went back to the man who'd been doing it for a lifetime, and they realised that it wasn't the timing for when the water went in, it was the noise that the product made while it was being mixed, and it changed, and that's when the water wanted to go in. Now, you couldn't teach that to you. You couldn't write that down in a process, so you have to pass it on face to face or hand to hand. And I think that's where a lot of our problems have come from, that we capture a lot of stuff, and you have your process maps and all those things, and they're great. But again, it comes back to that bit of human touch that's just needed in there to say, okay, this is what you need. And therefore, that information that we've got fed into all the things we're relying on now is not complete. And there are people sitting there who've retired going, I could tell you the answer to that.
A big part of things, I think, often is problem solving and trying to recover things when they've not gone to plan as well. And it's that experience that you pick up that can help you do that. And if, again, it's not something you could put in a manual and do that. You have to deal with those eventualities when they appear out the blue.
Yeah, I had a machine coming to me. I service machines for a couple of my tenants because I've done so many machine servicing. There is, and the sump was full of petrol. Now, I've never come across that before. I mean, I did wonder whether he put petrol in the sump by mistake, but he
sounds like it.
Well, yeah, but he doesn't know that there's 2 oils on it, but that's fine. I'll forgive him that bit. But it was like, okay, so I did all the first principles. I've given it back to him. It runs perfectly. There's no problem with it. I still don't know what happened. And I've tried looking on a couple of the forums, and they're very much surface level. But the people who would two people who'd be able to probably give me an answer to that, sadly, are both no longer with us. But they were proper old school, built things from the ground up time and time again. And so they probably had come across that and went, oh, it would be this or that. My son pitched in a version of what might be wrong. And I was quite dismissive to begin with, but then you have to go, okay, he's actually exploring, like I am, how to find stuff. So you can't actually just shut them down. You have to go, okay, fine. It could be, that's a possibility.
I also think there's something in there to actually focus on the solution, not the problem. Because certainly on the IT side, we see forever, we could spend ages looking for what went wrong.
Yeah.
Or we can fix it, move on and charge you less.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably true for repairs as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's my inquiring mind. I will sort of, I suppose I want to put it in the sort of memory bank. Okay, this is a possibility. But yeah.
Well, we've spoken a bit about your experience, some of the challenges you've overcome and how you developed that experience over the years. What excites you about business at the moment and companies and getting involved in that side of things?
I really enjoy seeing people and businesses grow, that development. And whether, Guy, Will, who worked with you, remember seeing him at his first networking event, absolutely terrified. Even just doing that sort of 10-second intro was like, quite nerve-wracking for him. And just giving him the confidence, talking with him, saying, look, we're here, we're supporting you. And now I guess he's flying. I know he's no longer with you, but, it's those amazing developments. So I think taking somebody under your wing, sharing, that confidence that one's built up, and it probably is fake to begin with, but, you develop it up, don't you? And you smile gracefully. And just seeing that development, and whether it's a small business or a big business, it doesn't matter. And I think we all face challenges, and I think the bigger businesses probably are more resistant to wanting to explore what can help. Because we've done it all, we don't need somebody to come along and tell us. So, but are those ones that are starting out, I definitely, and I've got 3 startups at the moment I'm working with, and they're all, at different stages, different, some is just a concept, so how do we move it forwards? Where do we go? So yeah, I think it's seeing that development, and I find the same, in any journey that I go on. I like seeing that improvement. Even my tenants, I've got 20 odd units, and my wife and I rent out. And you see those people come in and they're slightly sort of hesitant. I don't know whether this is going to work and things. And you see them gradually find their feet, and then, they start getting a few customers and things, point out, some of the pitfalls. I just, advise them free of charge, because actually if they succeed, then obviously I don't have to find a new tenant. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. If people want to find out more or get in touch, what's the best way they can do so?
Currently, I only have an email and a phone number. There is a website in development. I just need to sort it out. But at the moment, because I've got a building project, I'm a bit embroiled in. I just look for Stone Soup Solutions or Oliver Hemsley. I'm on LinkedIn. Perfect. So pretty much you can find me. If you put Rutland in, I'm sure that'll help you.
Yeah, you'll probably come up as the top image search, I suspect.
I don't look, because I always think wherever I do the search from, it's going to be corrupted by the fact that it knows me. So, and I'm not very good on the incognito, just so, depending on what I'm looking at, of course. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Oliver.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Cheers. That wraps up another episode of the Business Growth Show. Thanks for joining us.
We hope it gave you some ideas or inspiration that you can take away and use in your own business.
Don't forget to drop us a like, a follow and a rating, and hopefully we'll see you soon for the next episode.